All right, welcome in everyone to our deep dive today. And today we're going to be looking at how algorithms can actually perpetuate some societal biases.
Yeah.
And to do that, we're going to be taking excerpts from a book called Introduction: The Power of Algorithms.
Oh,
And this book really digs into this issue. You know, it's really easy to think of algorithms as these like neutral mathematical formulas, but
mhm.
this book really reveals a different story. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because the author actually opens with a pretty jarring personal anecdote. So back in 2010, she searched black girls on Google,
Huh.
and the first result was a porn site.
Wow.
So,
If
yeah.
that's pretty jarring for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty alarming. And it's a stark reminder that algorithms are not objective. They're
Yeah.
created by humans with,
Ugh.
their own inherent biases,
Mhm.
values, and even prejudices that can find their way into the code.
They're not objective at all. I think of math as being this purely objective thing.
Right.
But as soon as humans are involved,
Yeah.
it's informed by all of our experiences and our biases.
Right, and that's what makes this whole topic so unsettling.
Yeah.
Because we rely on these algorithms every day.
For everything,
Yeah.
basically.
Searching for information, connecting with friends too, making decisions.
Hmm.
But if the algorithms themselves are biased, what does that mean for us?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? What does that mean? Yeah. It means we need to be incredibly critical of the information that we're consuming. And the tools that we're using. Take the black girl search, for instance.
Right.
When the author revisited the search in 2012, pornography was still prominent, but it had shifted to target other women of color as well.
Wow.
It
So,
shows how these algorithms can learn and amplify biases over time, even without explicit programming.
wow. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where, the algorithm's initial bias
Mhm.
is leading to these results that then reinforce and even worsen that bias over time.
Mhm. Right.
From
It's almost as if the algorithm is saying, well, this is what people want when they
Yeah.
search this, so
Mm.
I'm going to give them more of it.
And that raises a crucial question for you. How can we identify and address these subtle forms of discrimination, especially when they're embedded in systems we use every day?
That's a really great question. And something that a lot of people are working on right now,
Hmm.
um, and I think one of the keys
Yeah.
is to understand how these algorithms work.
Mm.
Because a lot of times these companies are very secretive about how their algorithms work.
Right.
So if we don't know how they work, then we don't know where the bias is coming from.
Right.
So one of the ways that we can do this is by sort of reverse engineering these algorithms to try and understand what kinds of data they're being trained on and what kinds of decisions they're making. And then once we understand how they work, we can start to think about ways to mitigate that bias.
Okay.
There's a concept called algorithmic oppression,
Okay.
and it refers to the ways in which algorithms can actually reinforce existing social inequalities.
Mm.
So in the book, there are a couple of examples. One of them is that Google Photos was tagging black people as apes.
Ugh, that's awful.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's obviously a huge problem. And it's something that Google has since apologized for, and they've said that they've fixed. But it's a reminder that these algorithms are not perfect,
Right.
and they can make mistakes.
Yeah.
And sometimes those mistakes can be very harmful.
Absolutely.
Another example is that Google Maps searches were leading to the White House when using a racial slur.
Wow.
Again, this is a
Yeah.
huge problem, and it shows the pervasiveness of bias in these algorithms.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting because these incidents really underscore the pervasive nature of bias in algorithms.
Hmm.
And it can manifest in ways that are both subtle and profoundly harmful.
Yeah, and it's not just limited to those examples. These are just a few of the many examples
Yeah.
that we see in algorithmic oppression.
Right. It's kind of scary to think how much of what we see online is truly objective and how much is shaped by these hidden biases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so important to understand how these algorithms work. And so, for example, Google's PageRank algorithm, which determines search result rankings, plays a significant role in shaping what information we see.
So break that down a bit for our listener. What exactly is that and why is it so important in this conversation?
So PageRank
Yeah.
is Google's algorithm for deciding how important or authoritative a web page is. And it's based on a number of factors,
Mm-hmm.
including how many other websites link to that page.
Okay.
But the author argues that the system can create an unfair advantage
Yeah.
for websites that are already popular. So if you have a website that's already really popular, it's going to be easier for you to get to the top of the search results because you already have a lot of links pointing to your website. Whereas if you have a website that's brand new it's going to be much harder for you to get to the top of the search results
Yeah.
because you don't have as many links pointing to your website.
So it's like the algorithm is saying, the rich get richer,
Exactly.
even in the realm of information.
Yeah. And it's a digital Matthew effect where those who already have a lot of visibility and influence gain even more.
And I mean, that's really a great analogy because it ties into the author's argument that, these commercially driven algorithms often prioritize profit over fairness.
Yeah. They're designed to keep users engaged, clicking, and ultimately generating revenue.
Right.
And so this can sometimes lead to the amplification of sensationalized content,
Yeah.
even if it's harmful or misleading.
Right. And this leads us to a particular example that the author explores,
Right.
which is the case of Trayvon Martin and the rise of the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement. And this isn't just about biased search results. This is about how an algorithm can actually be influenced by and potentially profit from, real world events, even tragic ones.
Right. So the author's research looked at how Google's PageRank algorithm was impacted by the events surrounding Trayvon Martin's death.
Okay.
And so what they found was that there's a huge surge in searches related to Trayvon Martin after his death.
Right, because it was a high profile.
It was a huge national story.
Yeah.
And so whenever there's a surge in searches for a particular topic, Google's algorithms are going to pick up on that. And they're going to start showing more results that are related to that topic.
Okay.
And so what this means is that even though Trayvon Martin's death was a tragedy, it actually ended up generating a lot of revenue for Google.
Wow. Because people were clicking on those ads that were related to his death.
Right. And so this raises some really important ethical questions about whether or not Google has a responsibility to consider the societal impact of its algorithm.
Right, because they're benefiting financially from this tragedy.
Exactly. And it's not just Google. It's any company that's using algorithms to generate revenue.
Right.
They need to be thinking about the potential negative consequences of their algorithm.
So do you think they have a moral obligation to consider the societal impact of their algorithm?
I think they absolutely do. I think that any company that's using algorithms to make decisions that affect people's lives has a moral obligation to consider the potential impact of those decisions.
Right.
And I think that we need to start holding these companies accountable for the decisions that their algorithms are making.
So the author actually goes on to propose some solutions to address this problem. And one of the things that she advocates for are non-commercial search engines.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And information portals. So these would be platforms that are specifically designed to prioritize accuracy, fairness, and social responsibility over profit.
So they're not driven by advertising revenue.
Right.
Okay. So how would they be funded then?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. What are the potential benefits and challenges of this approach?
Well, I think one of the biggest benefits would be that we would have search engines that are actually designed to give us accurate information.
Right.
And not just information that's going to make them the most money.
Right.
So I think that would be a huge benefit. But of course, the challenge is, how do you fund these search engines if they're not being funded by advertising?
Yep.
So that's a good question. And I don't think there's an easy answer to it.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that we need to start thinking about because the current system is clearly not working.
Right.
And, I think that one potential solution would be to have these search engines be funded by the government.
Okay.
But of course, that raises a whole other set of questions about government censorship and things like that. So it's a really complicated issue. But I think it's one that's worth exploring.
Okay. It's almost like a call for a digital public square, right?
Yeah.
Where information is treated as a public good.
Yeah.
And not just a commodity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way to put it. It's a digital public square where everyone has access to information and where that information is not being filtered or manipulated.
Right. By commercial interests.
Right. It's a powerful vision, but it raises questions of feasibility and implementation. Absolutely. It does. But I think it's a vision worth striving for. And I think that the more we talk about these issues, the more likely we are to find solutions.
I agree. All right. So we're going to leave it there for part 1 of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
And when we come back, we'll pick up this conversation about information portals.
Great. Looking forward to it. So welcome back. And as we were saying, we're going to talk about information portals as a way to combat algorithmic oppression. But before we jump into that, I think it's really helpful to understand this broader context of how algorithms really operate in our lives.
Yeah.
We often talk about the algorithm as if it's emmis,
Yeah.
this singular entity.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's this complex ecosystem of algorithms working together.
Right. Yeah. It's really easy to forget that we're constantly interacting with algorithms, whether we're, scrolling through social media or shopping online or even just navigating traffic. They're shaping our experiences in ways we often don't even realize.
Yeah, it's become almost invisible how much we rely on algorithms.
Right. And that's why it's so crucial to understand how they work
Right.
and what factors are influencing their decision making.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
a lot of these algorithms rely on machine learning,
Okay.
which essentially means that they learn from data. So if the data itself is biased, the algorithm is likely going to perpetuate those biases.
Okay. So it's almost like teaching a child to read using only books. That present, like a narrow or distorted view of the world.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
So, they might learn to read, but their understanding of the world is limited by the biases in the material they were exposed to.
And in this case,
Yeah.
with algorithms, the books that they're learning from are, vast data sets of human behavior.
Right. And those can be.
Which can be riddled with biases, prejudices, societal inequalities, all of those things.
So how do we address this? If the data is biased,
Yeah.
how can we make sure the algorithms don't replicate those biases?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. There's no easy answer. But one approach is to focus on data diversity and representation, making sure that the data sets that are being used to train these algorithms reflect the full spectrum of human experiences and perspectives.
So it's about being mindful of who's collecting the data,
Mm-hmm.
how it's being collected, and what biases might be baked into the process.
Exactly. And that brings us to Candice and her story.
Okay.
She owns a black hair care business in a prestigious college town. And she's seen a decline in her business due to a number of factors, including changes in the local college's admissions policies.
Okay.
So the college had previously implemented affirmative action policies aimed at increasing opportunities for students of color. But those policies were recently dismantled.
Okay. So for our listener, can we just clarify what affirmative action is?
Yes, sir. Affirmative action refers to policies or programs that are designed to address historical and ongoing discrimination against certain groups, particularly in areas like education, employment, and housing. So essentially, it's creating a more level playing field for groups that have been systematically disadvantaged.
Okay, great. Thank you. So how does this all tie into Candace's business and, the algorithms that are shaping her visibility?
Right. So with fewer students of color attending the college, the algorithms that drive local search results are less likely to prioritize businesses like hers because there's a decrease in searches and engagement related to black hair care products in that particular area.
So it's like the algorithm is reflecting the changing demographics of the community.
Yeah, and it's highlighting how seemingly unrelated policy decisions can have a ripple effect on individuals and businesses through the workings of algorithms.
Right, and it really drives home this point that these algorithms are not operating in a vacuum.
Exactly, they're embedded in a complex social and political landscape.
Right, and their outputs are being influenced by so many factors.
A myriad of factors, some of which we might not even be aware of.
So what can we do? How do we make sure that algorithms are used to promote fairness and equity?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And again, there's no easy answer. But I think one of the things that we can do is to advocate for greater transparency and accountability in how these algorithms are designed and implemented.
Right, because right now it's almost like we're driving blindfolded.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Just trusting that they're going to take us to our destination, but we don't understand how they're making decisions along the way.
We have no idea what's going on under the hood.
Right, and another thing is, we need ethical guidelines for these systems.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Because we have ethical guidelines for doctors and lawyers.
And other professionals.
Right. So it stands to reason that we should also have them for people who are designing and deploying technologies that have such a profound impact on our lives.
Absolutely, I think. We need to move beyond this techno-utopian hype and really grapple with these real-world consequences of these technologies.
Right, and that requires a commitment to ethical considerations, social responsibility, and a deep understanding of the human impact of these systems.
Yeah, it's about putting people at the center of the conversation, not just the technology.
But it's also about recognizing that technology can be a tool for positive change.
Right. It's not inherently good or bad.
Right. It depends on how we use it.
Exactly.
And the author talks about the potential of algorithms to address societal issues, like, reducing bias in hiring practices or promoting access to healthcare and education.
Yeah, there are definitely ways that algorithms can be used for good.
Right.
For example, in healthcare, algorithms can be used to analyze medical images.
Yeah.
And help doctors to
Yeah.
make more accurate diagnoses.
Okay.
So there are definitely potential benefits.
It's fascinating to think about how they can be used to enhance our capabilities and really improve our lives in meaningful ways.
But I think it's also important to acknowledge that these technologies are still in their early stages of development.
Right. And there's a lot we don't know about their long-term implications.
Exactly. So we need to proceed with caution and a healthy dose of skepticism. And we need to be constantly questioning, evaluating, and refining these technologies to make sure they are aligned with our values.
Right. And this kind of brings us back to the author's call for these alternatives to the commercially driven algorithms that are, really dominating the current landscape. She's envisioning a future where information is treated as a public good, not just a commodity.
Yeah. That's a really powerful vision. And I think it resonates with a lot of people who are concerned about, the growing power of these tech giants and the erosion of privacy and autonomy in the digital age.
It's a vision worth striving for.
Absolutely. And it starts with recognizing that we have a choice. We can choose to be passive consumers of information, blindly accept it that the algorithms present to us. Or we can choose to be active participants, questioning, exploring, and demanding better.
So it's about reclaiming our agency in this digital world.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to shape these technologies and ensure they're used for the benefit of humanity.
And it's about recognizing that technology is not destiny. We have the power to choose the kind of digital world that we want to live in. A world where algorithms are used to empower individuals, strengthen communities, and create a more just and equitable society for all.
Wow. It's amazing how our conversation has gone from, a single Google search to this really deep dive into the fabric of our digital world.
It really is. It shows you how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, it really does. It seems like algorithms are touching every aspect of our lives these days.
Yeah, pretty much. And, the implications are huge.
The implications are profound. And kind of brings us back to Candace and her experience.
Right. Her story really highlights how algorithmic bias can play out in these unexpected ways.
Right, and have real-world consequences. So the author really uses her story to illustrate how seemingly unrelated events or policy decisions can actually have a ripple effect through the workings of algorithms.
So in this case, the dismantling of affirmative action policies at the local college had a direct impact
On the demographics.
of the student body,
Right.
which in turn influenced those algorithms that determine, local search results and advertising.
Right, so even though her business was still there, offering valuable services, it became less visible.
It's like she was being erased just because the data
shifted. It's exactly, and it really highlights the need for greater awareness and understanding of how these algorithms work.
Right, so Candace's story really emphasizes this interconnectedness of these issues. It's not just about, tweaking algorithms. It's about addressing these systemic issues.
That lead to bias and inequality in the first place.
Absolutely. So what can we do? How do we ensure that, algorithms are used in a way that promotes fairness and equity?
Well, like we said before, there's no easy answer to that. Well, we have to start somewhere.
Right. And I think recognizing that, technology is not some magical solution to all of society's problems. Yeah. We can't just, throw technology at a problem and expect it to be fixed.
Right. And we have to be mindful of the consequences of these technologies.
Right.
So how do we advocate for the responsible use of these technologies?
I think one way is to advocate for greater transparency and accountability from the companies that are creating these technologies.
So we need to know how these algorithms are working, what data they're using, and what their potential impacts might be.
Exactly. And we also need to be supporting the development of ethical guidelines for AI and algorithmic systems.
Okay, so these guidelines could provide a framework for ensuring that these technologies are used responsibly.
And for the benefit of society as a whole.
I love that idea of, non-commercial search engines and information portals.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. and I think it has a lot of potential.
It's a vision of a digital world where information is treated as, a shared resource that's accessible to all, and it's curated in a way
Yeah.
that promotes understanding and...
Critical thinking. And it puts the power back in the hands of the people.
Right. So as we kind of wrap up here, we've talked a lot about the potential harms of algorithms, but it's important to remember that we're not powerless in this.
Exactly. We have a choice.
We have a choice in how we interact with these technologies.
We can be passive consumers, or we can be active participants. We can demand better.
It's about reclaiming our agency in this digital world and recognizing that we have the power to shape these technologies and ensure that they're used for good.
Technology is not destiny.
Right. We get to decide what the future looks like.
And I think that's a really empowering message.
Absolutely. So that wraps up our deep dive into the world of algorithms and algorithmic oppression.
I hope this has given everyone who's listening a lot to think about.
I hope so too. And a lot to, go out and
research and to continue the conversation.
Yeah, let these companies decide. You know what our future looks like.
Exactly. It's up to all of us.
It's up to all of us to create a more just an equitable digital world.
I agree.
So thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.